It was Colonel Geoffrey Markham who first drew my attention to the peculiar circumstances surrounding the annual Christmas gathering at Hollycrown Manor, though at the time, I confess, I regarded his invitation more as an escape from London's dreary December fog than as an introduction to one of the most perplexing cases my friend Hercule Poirot would ever encounter. "You must come down to Yorkshire, Hastings," Markham had insisted over brandy at our club, his weathered face animated with a particular enthusiasm that English gentlemen reserve for country houses at Christmas. "Sir Alister Finch throws the most remarkable party. Old traditions, you know, and that famous holly-crowned diadem of his. Medieval piece, worth a king's ransom. The families displayed it every Christmas Eve for 3 centuries. I had demurred initially, knowing well Poirot's aversion to what he termed the English countryside in winter, all mud and sentiment. But Markham's description of the manor's Georgian elegance and the intriguing cast of characters who would gather there eventually overcame my reluctance. Besides, I reasoned, even my fastidious Belgian friend might appreciate the ordered beauty of an English Christmas, properly conducted. Hollycrown Manor stood like a golden jewel against the snow-laden Yorkshire moors, its honey-coloured stone glowing warmly in the crisp December light. The neoclassical portico, wound with the holly and ivy, presented itself with the confident elegance of the Georgian era, while tall windows promised warmth and light within. As our motor crunched up the gravel drive between ancient yews, I felt that peculiar lift of spirits that comes with the anticipation of a proper English Christmas. Sir Alister Finch received us in the great hall with the commanding presence of a man accustomed to deference. He was perhaps 65, with silver hair and penetrating grey eyes that seemed to catalogue and evaluate everything they encountered. His handshake was firm, his manner cordial yet somehow calculating. The bearing of a successful industrialist who had built his fortune through shrewd judgment of human nature. "Captain Hastings, delighted to have you," he said, his voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to being heard. "Markham speaks of your adventures with that Belgian detective fellow. Fascinating work, I should imagine, though I confess I've always believed that most mysteries solve themselves if one simply observes human nature closely enough." The assembled company was, as Markham had promised, a study in contrasts and hidden tensions. Lady Eleanor Finch, Sir Alister's wife of 2 years, possessed the ethereal beauty of a pre-Raphaelite painting, though her violet eyes held depth that suggested intelligence far keener than her delicate appearance might indicate. She was perhaps 30 years younger than her husband, and the whispered conversations that ceased upon our arrival suggested that their marriage had occasioned considerable speculation in Yorkshire society. Julian Thorne, Sir Alister's nephew and heir presumptive, stood by the great fireplace with the restless energy of a man perpetually at odds with his circumstances. Dark-haired and lean, with the sensitive features of an artist, he possessed that particular combination of pride and financial dependence that so often breeds resentment in family relationships. His paint-stained fingers and somewhat bohemian attire marked him as the family's artistic black sheep. Mr. Percival Reed, Sir Alister's longtime business partner and solicitor, presented a study in professional discretion. A small, precise man with wire-rimmed spectacles and an air of quiet competence, he had the manner of one who knew all his clients' secrets and had long ago ceased to be surprised by human folly. His frequent glances at his pocket watch suggested either pressing business elsewhere or a desire to be anywhere but in the midst of family dynamics. Dr. James Morrison, the family physician, completed the intimate gathering. A man of perhaps 50 with graying temples and kind eyes, he possessed that particular combination of professional authority and personal warmth that marks the truly gifted physician. His presence at the Christmas celebration spoke to a friendship with Sir Alister that transcended mere professional duty. The centerpiece of the evening's festivities was, of course, the Holly Crown itself. As we gathered in the drawing-room after dinner, Sir Alister made quite a ceremony of displaying the ancient diadem. It was a remarkable piece. Medieval craftsmanship of the finest order, with delicate gold leaves that seemed to tremble in the firelight and garnets that glowed like drops of blood. The crown rested upon a velvet cushion within a specially constructed glass case, secured with an elaborate lock that Mr. Reed assured us was quite impregnable. 3 centuries this crown has graced our Christmas celebrations, Sir Alister declared, his voice carrying a note of deep satisfaction. It survived the Civil War, the Jacobite risings, and 2 world wars. Rather fitting that it should witness what I suspect will be the most significant Christmas in the Finch family's history. The cryptic nature of this pronouncement cast a palpable chill over the gathering. Lady Eleanor's delicate features tightened almost imperceptibly, while Julian Thorne's artistic temperament seemed to darken with foreboding. Dr. Morrison cleared his throat diplomatically, but Sir Alister merely smiled with the satisfaction of a man who enjoyed keeping others in suspense. It was at precisely 11 o'clock, as we prepared to attend the midnight service at the village church, that disaster struck. The lights failed suddenly, not the gradual dimming of overtaxed circuits, but the abrupt darkness of a complete power failure. In the confusion that followed, someone screamed, furniture overturned, and for perhaps 30 seconds, chaos reigned in the elegant drawing room. When the emergency lighting restored partial illumination, the impossible had occurred. The glass case remained locked, its seals intact, yet the holly crown had vanished completely. In its place upon the velvet cushion lay a single holly leaf, its sharp points glinting in the uncertain light, and upon one of those points a small smear of what appeared to be blood. But this was merely the prelude to true horror. For when Sir Alister failed to respond to our calls, Dr. Morrison insisted upon checking his study. There we found our host slumped over his desk, an antique letter opener protruding from between his shoulder blades, his eyes staring sightlessly at the Christmas cards scattered across his blotter. The holly crown had vanished in a manner that defied explanation, and Sir Alister Finch was dead, murdered in his own home while surrounded by family and friends. As the Yorkshire police was summoned through the snow-blocked roads, I found myself thinking of Poirot and his little grey cells, wondering how even his remarkable intellect would unravel a mystery that seemed to violate the very laws of possibility. The Christmas bells of the village church tolled midnight across the snow-covered moors, but at Hollycrown Manor, the season of peace and goodwill had given way to something far darker. A puzzle that would test the limits of logical deduction and reveal secrets that had festered beneath the surface of respectable society for far too long. The Yorkshire Constabulary arrived within the hour, led by Inspector Bradshaw, a stout, practical man whose 30 years of police work had prepared him for most of human nature's darker impulses, though his increasingly furrowed brow betrayed bewilderment at the scene before him. A methodical fellow with greying whiskers and the no-nonsense manner of the Yorkshire dales, Bradshaw examined the locked glass case with the thoroughness of a terrier, yet this particular quarry proved more elusive than most. "In all my years," he muttered, circling the intact case for the 4th time, "I've never encountered anything quite like this. The lock shows no tampering, the glass unbroken, yet the crown has vanished completely." His weathered hands traced the edges with professional precision, searching for some hidden mechanism that might explain the impossible disappearance. Dr. Morrison had assumed the grim task of examining Sir Alister's body with clinical detachment, though his usual warmth had given way to professional efficiency. "The wound was precisely placed," he reported to Inspector Bradshaw, "between the 3rd and 4th ribs, angled upward toward the heart. Death would have been nearly instantaneous. Whoever did this possessed either considerable anatomical knowledge or remarkable luck." The slight tremor in his voice betrayed the personal cost of examining a friend's remains. The assembled company watched the investigation with varying degrees of anxiety. Lady Eleanor had composed herself admirably after the initial shock, though her pale complexion and trembling hands betrayed the strain she endured. She sat in the wing-back chair near the fireplace, violet eyes fixed upon some distant point, seeking refuge in memories far removed from present horror. Julian Thorne paced with barely contained agitation, his artistic temperament struggling with brutal reality. "Uncle Alistair was many things," he said suddenly, breaking oppressive silence, "but hardly the sort to inspire murderous passion. His sins were more commercial, sharp dealing perhaps, but nothing that would drive someone to this." Mr. Reed adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles nervously and cleared his throat. "If I may venture an observation, Inspector, Sir Alistair had been rather cryptic in recent weeks about certain business matters. Nothing specific, but there was an air of expectation about him, as if anticipating some significant development. His professional discretion warred visibly with his desire to be helpful." Inspector Bradshaw's methodical questioning revealed the sequence of events with frustrating clarity. The power failure had lasted exactly 32 seconds, according to Mr. Reed's pocket watch, during which the drawing room was plunged into complete darkness. Each person could account for their general location. Lady Eleanor seated near the fireplace, Julian by the window, Dr. Morrison examining a book, Mr. Reed checking his timepiece. Yet in the confusion of overturned furniture and startled exclamations, none could provide definitive alibis for others. Most perplexing was Sir Alistair's movements during those crucial seconds. He had been present when the lights failed, standing beside the glass case delivering cryptic remarks about this particular Christmas's significance. Yet somehow, in that brief interval, he had reached his study, been murdered, and his killer had returned to the drawing room, all while the holly crown vanished from its supposedly impregnable case. The study itself offered few additional clues. Sir Alistair's desk was neat, save for scattered Christmas cards, his safe remained locked and undisturbed, and the French windows opening onto the terrace were securely latched from inside. Curiously, the desk lamp still glowed, though the rest of the house had lost power. "The study's on a separate circuit," Mr. Reed explained. "Sir Alistair insisted the safe and telephone require continuity." Among the Christmas cards, one sealed with green wax bore a holly device like the family crest, its corner bent as if examined and carefully replaced. Dr. Morrison mentioned an anonymous letter that had vexed Sir Alistair recently. "The holly is ours. Return what was stolen." Lady Eleanor had dismissed it as melodrama, but the timing seemed ominous now. Mr. Reed revealed another crucial detail. Sir Alistair had planned to announce the Crown's donation to a museum, sensible and advantageous for taxes. Julian's hands flew in agitation. Confiscated, rather. The revelation cast new light on potential motives. "The timing troubles me most," Inspector Bradshaw confided as dawn broke grey over the Yorkshire moors. 32 seconds to commit murder, steal a priceless artifact, and return undetected. It suggests either superhuman efficiency or careful premeditation. As the investigation continued, I found myself wishing desperately for Poirot's presence. This was precisely the sort of puzzle that would engage his remarkable intellect. A locked room mystery combined with impossible theft, wrapped in complex family relationships. The physical evidence was minimal, the psychological currents deep and treacherous, and somewhere among these apparently respectable people lurked a mind capable of both ingenious planning and cold-blooded murder. By 10 o'clock the following morning, the snow had settled into an unyielding crust across the Yorkshire moors, and Holly Crown Manor bore the exhausted stillness that follows catastrophe. It was then that Colonel Markham made the suggestion that would transform our investigation. "We must telegraph Poirot. If anyone can unravel this impossible business, it's your Belgian friend." Inspector Bradshaw initially resisted with characteristic Yorkshire stubbornness. "Foreign methods," he grumbled, adjusting his constable's helmet against the bitter wind. "All theory and no practical sense. Give me fingerprints and footprints over psychology any day." However, the impossible nature of the crime gradually wore down his resistance, particularly when the morning's second search of the drawing room revealed no hidden mechanisms, no secret passages, and no rational explanation for the crown's vanishing. Poirot arrived by the afternoon train, his immaculate appearance a stark contrast to our disheveled state after a sleepless night of fruitless investigation. Despite the arduous journey through snow-blocked roads, his patent leather shoes gleamed, his mustache remained perfectly waxed, and his overcoat showed not a single wrinkle. He surveyed Hollycrown Manor with those sharp green eyes that missed nothing, taking particular note of the Georgian symmetry and the ancient yews flanking the drive. "Ah, mon ami Hastings," he said, removing his gloves with characteristic precision. "You summon me to Yorkshire in December, always the fogs, the draughts, and the murders. But courage, we shall restore order where chaos has taken residence." His gaze swept the assembled company with the calculating intensity of a jeweler examining precious stones for hidden flaws. Inspector Bradshaw presented the facts with admirable thoroughness, though his skeptical tone betrayed doubt about continental methods. Poirot listened in complete silence, his egg-shaped head tilted slightly, fingers steepled before him. Only his eyes moved, cataloguing details with mechanical precision while his mind processed information through channels invisible to ordinary observers. "Inspector," Poirot said when the recitation concluded, "you have presented the facts with commendable clarity, yet facts without understanding are merely chaos wearing the mask of order. Permit me to examine this scene with fresh eyes, for often the truth hides not in what we see, but in what we assume we understand." His examination of the glass case was unlike anything I'd witnessed. Where Inspector Bradshaw had searched for mechanical explanations, hidden springs, false bottoms, concealed openings, Poirot studied the case as if it were a living thing capable of revealing its secrets through subtle signs. He measured distances with his walking stick, examined the velvet cushion through a magnifying glass, and spent considerable time studying the single holly leaf that remained. "Most interesting," he murmured, producing a small notebook from his waistcoat pocket. "The holly leaf, it is placed with precision, not dropped in haste. See how the points align perfectly. This is not accident, mes amis, but deliberate communication, though the message remains obscured." The study received equally meticulous attention. Poirot examined Sir Alister's position with clinical detachment, noting the angle of the wound, the arrangement of papers, the precise placement of the letter opener. He paid particular attention to the desk lamp that continued glowing despite the power failure. "The separate circuit," he observed to Mr. Reed, who hovered nervously nearby. "Most convenient for our murderer, no? The study remains illuminated while the drawing-room plunges into darkness. One begins to see the architecture of this crime." His interviews with the suspects were brief but revealing. Lady Eleanor submitted to questioning with remarkable composure, though her hands trembled slightly as she recounted Sir Alister's unusual excitement about this memorable Christmas. Julian Thorne proved more volatile, his artistic temperament warring with genuine grief as he spoke of his uncle's complex nature. Generous in some ways, ruthless in others. Dr. Morrison provided the most intriguing detail. Sir Alister had recently consulted him about insomnia, claiming to be troubled by dreams of past mistakes. He spoke of things coming full circle, the physician recalled, debts that demanded payment, though the creditor remained unnamed. Mr. Reed, maintaining professional discretion even under Poirot's gentle probing, admitted that Sir Alister had recently made inquiries about security arrangements for valuable items, though nothing specific had been discussed. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the snow-covered grounds, Poirot gathered us in the drawing-room. The empty glass case dominated the space, its vacancy somehow more ominous than any treasure it might have contained. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice carrying quiet authority, We face a puzzle that appears to challenge conventional logic, a locked room mystery combined with impossible theft, executed with precision, suggesting intimate knowledge of this house and its occupants. Yet I assure you, the solution exists within the realm of human possibility. Already I perceive contradictions that are most illuminating. But patience, all will be revealed in due course. His eyes swept the assembled company with renewed interest, and I sensed that the little grey cells had indeed begun their Christmas work. Poirot's individual interviews commenced with the methodical precision that had earned him renown throughout Europe, each conducted in Sir Alister's study, where the bloodstain on the Persian carpet served as a silent reminder of the previous night's violence. He had arranged the questioning with deliberate psychological calculation, knowing that confronting each suspect with the scene of the crime would reveal truths that comfort might conceal. Lady Eleanor entered first, her ethereal beauty somehow enhanced by grief as she settled into the leather chair facing her late husband's desk. Poirot studied her with the intensity of a portrait painter, noting how her violet eyes avoided the dark stain while her hands trembled despite her composed demeanor. "Madame?" Poirot began with characteristic gentleness. "Your husband's behavior in recent weeks, Dr. Morrison spoke of unusual excitement, cryptic remarks about this Christmas being memorable. What did you observe of these changes?" Lady Eleanor's composure wavered slightly. Alister had become increasingly secretive, spending hours locked in this study examining old papers, making mysterious telephone calls to London. When I inquired, he would smile enigmatically and speak of Christmas revelations and settling old accounts. I assumed he meant some grand gesture, jewelry perhaps, or a surprise announcement. I never imagined it would lead to this. Her gesture toward the bloodstain was unconsciously graceful, yet Poirot noticed how she favored her right hand, a small bandage visible on her forefinger. "A recent injury, madam. Yesterday afternoon, decorating with holly. Careless of me, the thorns are quite sharp." Julian Thorne's interview revealed deeper currents of resentment. The young artist's paint-stained fingers drummed nervously against his knee as he spoke of his uncle's controlling nature with barely suppressed bitterness. "Uncle Alister enjoyed power over people," Julian said, his voice carrying years of accumulated frustration. "He collected secrets like other men collect stamps, using knowledge of vulnerabilities to maintain control. Our relationship had deteriorated badly. He threatened to cut me from his will if I continued wasting time on artistic frivolities." Poirot observed Julian's left hand bore a fresh bandage on the thumb. "Another casualty of the holly decorations?" "Palette knife accident yesterday," Julian replied quickly. "I'm left-handed. Occupational hazard." Mr. Reed proved the most professionally guarded, his solicitor's training warring with obvious distress as he carefully parsed each response. However, under Poirot's gentle persistence, crucial details emerged. Sir Alister possessed 2 keys to the glass case, Reed admitted reluctantly. "One remained in my safe deposit box in Leeds, the other on his person. However, Inspector Bradshaw, I must confess something troubling. The key chain was absent from Sir Alister's body when discovered." Inspector Bradshaw's head snapped up. "Missing? You failed to mention this." "In the confusion of the moment, yes, the key is gone. Yet paradoxically, the case remains locked." Dr. Morrison's interview provided the most illuminating revelation. Beyond confirming Sir Alister's recent insomnia and anxiety, the physician disclosed a discovery that transformed the investigation's entire focus. Among Alister's papers, I glimpsed an old letter that seemed to cause him considerable distress, Morrison revealed. Something about a card game from his father's era, involving the Holly Crown and a man named Blackwood. Alister spoke of inherited sins and debts demanding payment across generations. This revelation prompted Poirot to request access to Sir Alister's locked desk drawer. Among the yellowed documents was a letter dated 50 years earlier, detailing how Sir Alister's father had won the Holly Crown in a high-stakes card game from one Marcus Blackwood, though the transfer was never completed due to Blackwood's sudden death in a riding accident. "Voilà," Poirot announced with quiet satisfaction. "The anonymous letter, 'The Holly is ours. Return what was stolen,' assumes new significance. Someone, presumably a Blackwood descendant, has discovered this historical injustice and come to reclaim their inheritance." The afternoon brought additional physical evidence when Poirot insisted upon examining the manor's exterior. Beneath the study's French windows, barely visible in the pristine snow, was a single, unusually shaped footprint. Not quite a boot, not quite a shoe, but something distinctly different. "Most intriguing," Poirot murmured, studying the impression through his magnifying glass. "Our murderer has left a signature, though its meaning remains obscured." As evening approached, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room for a preliminary assessment. The empty glass case dominated the space, its vacancy more ominous than any treasure it might have contained. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we face not merely theft and murder, but the culmination of a 50-year-old injustice. Someone has come to Hollycrown Manor not as a common criminal, but as an avenger seeking to right historical wrongs. The question that remains is whether justice or revenge was the true motive, and whether the killer stands among us or has vanished into the Yorkshire night." His green eyes swept the assembled company with renewed intensity, and I sensed the little grey cells had begun to perceive patterns invisible to ordinary minds. The morning brought Inspector Bradshaw's moment of triumph, announced with the satisfaction of a man vindicated by solid police work. He strode into the breakfast room carrying a small evidence bag, his weathered face beaming as he surveyed the assembled company with obvious pleasure. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have made significant progress," Bradshaw declared, placing the bag upon the sideboard with ceremonial care. "A thorough search of the cloakroom has yielded this." He withdrew a brass key, its trefoil bow catching the winter light streaming through the frost-etched windows. "Found in Mr. Julian Thorne's overcoat pocket." Julian sprang from his chair, coffee cup clattering against its saucer. "That's impossible. I've never seen that key before in my life." Mr. Reed leaned forward, his face draining of colour as he adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles. "Good heavens, that's Sir Alister's case key. But where is the chain? He always wore it on a silver chain." "No chain present," Bradshaw replied crisply. "But the key itself is quite sufficient evidence. Combined with our inquiries in leads revealing Mr. Thorne's recent visit to a pawnbroker, making specific inquiries about medieval jewellery valuations, the picture becomes remarkably clear." Lady Eleanor's delicate hand flew to her throat. "Julian, surely you couldn't have, not for money." "The financial motive is compelling," Dr. Morrison added sadly. "Your gambling debts, Julian, they've grown considerably worse than you admitted." Poirot, who had remained silent throughout these revelations, approached the evidence bag with the careful attention of a jeweler examining a precious stone. He studied the key without touching it, his head tilted at that characteristic angle that indicated his little grey cells were working at full capacity. "Inspector," Poirot said finally, "your discovery is most illuminating, yet it raises questions more intriguing than those it answers." He gestured delicately toward the key. "Observe, if you please, the condition of this brass. No fresh scratches upon the wards, no telltale strain from recent use against a tight mechanism. This key has not been employed to open anything in recent hours." Bradshaw frowned. "What of it? He could have—" "And see here," Poirot continued, producing his magnifying glass. "Tiny particles of green wax upon the inner curve of the bow, precisely where a chain would rest. Yet you found no chain. The wax comes from that sealed envelope upon Sir Alister's desk, the one bearing the Holly device. If Monsieur Thorne had hastily removed this key and pocketed it, the wax would appear on the outer edges where fingers grasp. Instead, it lies where metal touched metal, suggesting the key was on its chain when it brushed the wax, and only later was the chain removed. Julian's face showed a mixture of hope and confusion. Then someone else placed it in my coat? The sequence is wrong for a simple theft, Poirot mused. And consider the wound itself, angled upward, suggesting a shorter assailant. Monsieur Thorne is tall and left-handed besides. This thrust came from a right hand. Inspector Bradshaw's certainty wavered slightly. You're splitting hairs, Mr. Poirot. Perhaps, but the hair belongs to truth. Poirot moved to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered grounds. There is something else, Inspector. Our inquiries in the village have revealed that a man named Blackwood has taken rooms at the Red Hart Inn. He made specific inquiries about Holly Crown Manor and possesses footwear that would match the unusual print beneath the study windows. The revelation sent a visible shock through the assembled company. Lady Eleanor gripped her chair back, while Mr. Reed's face went ashen. Blackwood, Dr. Morrison whispered. After all these years. Indeed, Poirot continued. The anonymous letter, "The Holly is ours. Return what was stolen," assumes new significance when we consider that 50 years ago, Sir Alister's father won the Holly Crown from Marcus Blackwood in circumstances that were, shall we say, questionable. This morning also brought another curious discovery. Upon the drawing-room mantelpiece, precisely where the crown had been displayed, someone had placed a small wooden box containing a single playing card, the ace of spades, with a tiny holly leaf painted in its center. A message, Poirot observed, examining the card carefully. Not a taunt, but a statement of claim. The Blackwood family has not forgotten their grievance. Inspector Bradshaw gathered himself. Then we have two suspects, the heir and the avenger. One will break under questioning. Patience, mon ami, Poirot cautioned. We are being invited to admire a painting too elaborate for its frame. Someone wishes us to see obvious guilt where deeper truths lie hidden. The key placed so conveniently, the financial motive so readily discovered, these are the brushstrokes of misdirection, not the signature of guilt. His green eyes swept the company with renewed intensity, and I sensed the little grey cells had begun to perceive patterns invisible to ordinary minds. Poirot's investigation required a journey through the snow-laden Yorkshire countryside to the Red Hart Inn, where the mysterious Mr. Blackwood had taken lodgings. The ancient coaching inn stood like a beacon against the white landscape, its diamond-paned windows glowing warmly in the afternoon light, smoke curling from its chimneys into the crystalline air. The landlord, Mr. Dodd, greeted us with the mixture of curiosity and deference that Poirot's reputation invariably inspired. A ruddy-faced man with the solid bearing of one who had served travelers for decades, he confirmed that their guest had indeed been present during the crucial hours of the previous evening. "Mr. Thomas Blackwood, aye," Dodd said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Quiet gentleman, keeps to himself mostly. Was right here in the tap-room when the church bells struck midnight. Asked me and the missus about the old Finch Christmas traditions. Never left the inn until well past quarter after the hour. My wife will swear to it, and there's 3 other guests can vouch for his presence." Thomas Blackwood rose as we entered the inn's private parlor, and I was immediately struck by his dignified bearing. Perhaps 50 years of age, with graying temples and intelligent dark eyes, he possessed the weathered dignity of one who had endured considerable hardship without surrendering his essential character. His handshake was firm, his manner direct, yet respectful. "You have come about the Holly Crown," he said without preamble. "I expected as much. I want it acknowledged for what it truly represents. Stolen property that belongs to my family by right." Poirot settled into the offered chair with characteristic precision, his green eyes studying Blackwood with the intensity of a jeweler examining a precious stone. "You sent the anonymous letter to Sir Alister, monsieur?" "I did." "The Holly is ours. Return what was stolen." Simple truth, though I suspect Sir Alister chose to interpret it as a threat rather than a legitimate claim. Blackwood's voice carried decades of accumulated bitterness, yet remained controlled and articulate. From his worn leather portfolio, he produced documents that told a story of historical injustice, letters, gambling debts, witness statements, all pointing to a rigged card game 50 years earlier in which Sir Alister's father had systematically cheated Blackwood's grandfather out of the family heirloom. "My grandfather Marcus died shortly after that game," Blackwood explained, his voice heavy with old grief. "Some called it accident, but a man doesn't simply fall from a horse he'd ridden for 30 years. The shame of losing our heritage, combined with the knowledge that he'd been deliberately cheated, destroyed him." Poirot examined Blackwood's unusual footwear with particular interest, a specially constructed boot to accommodate what appeared to be an old injury to his right foot. The sole pattern matched exactly the print we had discovered beneath the study window, yet the timeline made Blackwood's presence there during the murder impossible. "The boot print troubles me, monsieur," Poirot admitted. "It matches precisely, yet your alibi is unshakable. 3 witnesses place you here at the crucial time." "I was indeed at the manor yesterday afternoon," Blackwood acknowledged. "I walked the grounds, examining the house where my family's treasure was displayed like a trophy. I may have approached the study windows, but I departed well before evening. I had no intention of skulking about like a common thief." Our return journey to Hollycrown Manor provided Poirot with the opportunity for one of his methodical reconstructions. Using his pocket watch, we timed the journey from the inn to the manor. 47 minutes on foot through the snow, far too long for Blackwood to have committed murder and returned to establish his alibi. Back at the manor, Poirot conducted a fascinating experiment with the electrical systems. In the fuse cupboard, he discovered traces of violet-scented candle wax on the main switch plate, evidence that someone had prepared for the power failure with a scented candle at hand. "Most illuminating," he murmured, producing his magnifying glass to examine the wax more closely. "Someone anticipated the darkness, Hastings. This was not spontaneous action, but careful preparation." The timeline reconstruction proved equally revealing. From Sir Alister's last known position beside the glass case to the study required 21 seconds at normal pace. The act of murder, theft, and return to the drawing room could not possibly be accomplished in the remaining 11 seconds, even assuming superhuman efficiency. "The sequence is impossible," Poirot concluded. "Yet it occurred. Therefore, our understanding of the sequence must be flawed." Mr. Reed's revelation of Sir Alister's testamentary intentions added another layer of complexity. The proposed codicil would have provided generous settlements for Lady Eleanor and Julian, while establishing a trust to handle any legitimate claims against the Holy Crown. Sir Alister was attempting to right historical wrongs, Reed explained reluctantly. The Blackwood claim had reached his attention, and he wished to resolve the matter honorably while protecting his family's interests. As evening approached, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing-room once more. The empty glass case dominated the space, its vacancy more ominous than any treasure it might have contained. His green eyes swept the assembled company with renewed intensity, and I sensed that the little grey cells had begun to perceive patterns invisible to ordinary minds. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we have established that Mr. Blackwood, despite his legitimate grievance and opportunity for revenge, could not have committed these crimes. The physical evidence places him at the scene, yet the timeline makes his guilt impossible. This paradox illuminates the true nature of our mystery. Someone has gone to considerable trouble to implicate an innocent man while concealing their own guilt behind a facade of impossibility." The psychological tensions in the room were palpable as each suspect contemplated Poirot's words, knowing that the net of logic was drawing ever tighter around the true culprit. The morning brought a development that transformed our understanding of the entire affair. Lady Eleanor was discovered in her chambers by the housemaid, unconscious and pale as winter moonlight, clutching something in her delicate hand with such desperate intensity that Dr. Morrison required considerable effort to pry her fingers open. What emerged was an antique silver locket, its surface engraved with intricate holly leaves that seemed to dance in the morning light. The piece was clearly valuable, its craftsmanship speaking of an earlier, more elegant age. Yet its presence in Lady Eleanor's possession raised immediate questions about how she had acquired it and why she had concealed it so desperately. Dr. Morrison's examination revealed that Lady Eleanor had been administered a powerful sedative, most likely through her evening tea. "She will recover completely," he assured us, though his professional calm could not entirely mask his concern. However, this was no accidental overdose. Someone deliberately rendered her unconscious, presumably to prevent her from revealing something of crucial importance to our investigation. Poirot examined the locket with the reverent attention of a scholar handling an ancient manuscript. When he opened the delicate clasp, 2 miniature portraits were revealed, painted with the exquisite skill that marked the finest work of the previous century. One depicted a younger Sir Alistair, his features softer but unmistakably recognizable. The other showed a woman of extraordinary beauty, with dark eyes that seemed to hold secrets and a mouth that suggested both passion and sorrow. "Most illuminating," Poirot murmured, studying the portraits through his magnifying glass. "The lady is unknown to me, yet the resemblance to our Mr. Thomas Blackwood is quite unmistakable. The same intelligent eyes, the same determined chin. This, mes amis, is surely a member of the Blackwood family, and one who clearly held great significance for Sir Alistair." Julian Thorne, summoned to examine the locket, confirmed Poirot's suspicions with obvious reluctance. "I saw Uncle Alistair with that locket years ago, when I was still a child. He would sit in his study late at night, holding it and staring at the portraits with an expression I couldn't understand then. When I asked about the woman, he became quite agitated and locked the locket away. I never saw it again until now." Mr. Reed's professional discretion cracked under Poirot's gentle but persistent questioning. "Sir Alistair did speak of a woman from his past," the solicitor admitted with obvious discomfort. "Someone connected to the Blackwood family who had suffered greatly as a result of his father's actions. He felt a profound moral obligation to make amends, though he never specified the exact nature of their relationship." The locket's discovery prompted Poirot to re-examine the physical evidence from the night of the murder with renewed intensity. He paid particular attention to the holly leaf that had been placed so precisely upon the velvet cushion where the crown had rested, studying it through his magnifying glass with the concentration of a botanist examining a rare specimen. "Hastings," he said suddenly, his voice carrying that note of quiet triumph that indicated a significant breakthrough, "observe this leaf most carefully. The shape, the coloration, the particular arrangement of the thorns. This is not from the holly trees that grace the grounds of Hollycrown Manor, nor from any of the decorative arrangements within the house." He produced samples of holly gathered from various locations throughout the manor, comparing them methodically with the mysterious leaf. The differences, once pointed out, were unmistakable. The leaf from the case possessed a subtly different shape, with rounder edges and a distinctive purplish tinge to its berries that marked it as a rare cultivar. "This particular variety," Poirot explained, "is not commonly found in Yorkshire. It requires careful cultivation and specialized knowledge to maintain. Someone with botanical expertise, perhaps, or access to a private conservatory where such specimens might flourish." Dr. Morrison's reaction to this revelation was immediate and telling. The color drained from his weathered features, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his medical bag. I do maintain a small conservatory," he admitted reluctantly. "It's a hobby of mine, growing unusual specimens. But surely you cannot suggest that I suggest nothing, mon ami," Poirot replied with characteristic gentleness. "I merely observe that the evidence speaks its own language, and that language tells us our murderer possesses knowledge and access that narrows our field of suspects considerably." The psychological implications of these discoveries created a palpable tension among the remaining members of the household. Lady Eleanor's unconscious state meant she could neither defend herself nor provide crucial information, while the locket's contents suggested romantic entanglements and family secrets that cast previous assumptions in an entirely new light. Poirot gathered the suspects in the drawing room as afternoon shadows lengthened across the snow-covered grounds. The empty glass case seemed to mock our efforts, its vacancy a constant reminder of the central impossibility that continued to defy explanation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, his green eyes reflecting the firelight with predatory intensity, "we have discovered that this affair extends far beyond simple theft and murder. The locket reveals connections spanning decades, while the botanical evidence suggests our culprit possesses specialized knowledge and carefully planned this elaborate deception. Someone among us has woven a web of misdirection so intricate that even the sequence of events has been deliberately obscured." He paused, studying each face with the attention of a portraitist capturing subtle expressions. "The drugging of Lady Eleanor confirms that our murderer fears exposure, yet it also suggests that she possessed knowledge crucial to unraveling this mystery. When she awakens, I suspect her testimony will illuminate the final pieces of this most complex puzzle." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusations and barely contained fear, for each person present understood that Poirot's methodical investigation was drawing inexorably toward its conclusion, and that the truth, when finally revealed, would shatter the carefully maintained facades that had concealed guilt for far too long. The sedative's effects began to fade near midday, and Lady Eleanor stirred with the fragile grace of one emerging from a troubled dream. Dr. Morrison hovered anxiously as she accepted weak tea, though Poirot noted how the physician's usual confident bedside manner seemed strained, his hands trembling slightly as he checked her pulse with professional thoroughness. "I remember fragments of yesterday," Lady Eleanor said softly, her violet eyes focusing with surprising clarity despite her recent ordeal. "I went to Alistair's study in the afternoon to discuss inviting the rector for Christmas dinner. He was on the telephone, a trunk call to London, I believe, and I heard him say quite distinctly, 'At midnight the ghost will be laid to rest, and all old accounts will finally be settled.' When he noticed my presence, he ended the call abruptly and locked something in his desk drawer with unusual care." Poirot leaned forward with characteristic attention. "What was his demeanor, madame? Excited? Anxious? Both, I think. He seemed to be anticipating something momentous, yet there was an underlying sadness about him, as if he were preparing to lose something precious. He told me he intended to make a significant announcement after the midnight service, something that would right historical wrongs while honoring the memory of those who had suffered unjustly." Before Poirot could pursue this revelation further, a commotion erupted from the direction of the east wing. Smoke was pouring from the conservatory windows, and by the time we reached the scene, flames were consuming Dr. Morrison's prized botanical collection with alarming intensity. The heat was fierce, the smoke acrid with the smell of burning plants and something else, paraffin, deliberately applied. "Stand back," Inspector Bradshaw commanded, though Dr. Morrison lunged forward desperately. "My specimens, the rare holly varieties, they're irreplaceable." Poirot caught the physician's sleeve with surprising strength. "Non, mon docteur. To rush into such flames is to embrace certain destruction. The fire burns too purposefully to be accidental." When the blaze was finally contained, we surveyed the devastation with grim understanding. This had been deliberate arson, designed to eliminate crucial evidence. Among the charred remains, Poirot knelt carefully and retrieved with his tweezers a single heat-withered berry, its distinctive purple coloration still faintly visible despite the damage. "The rare cultivar that provided our mysterious holly leaf," he murmured with quiet satisfaction. "Someone has attempted to erase the botanical signature that might have led us to the truth. Yet even fire cannot completely destroy evidence when one knows precisely what to seek." A message from the village telephone exchange provided another crucial piece of the puzzle. Sir Alistair had indeed made a trunk call the previous evening to the curator of Leeds Museum, inquiring whether they would accept immediate transfer of the Holly Crown or its monetary equivalent held in trust. He had promised to confirm the arrangement after midnight, suggesting he had planned to survive the evening's events. Back in the study, Poirot's examination of Sir Alistair's locked desk drawer revealed items that transformed our understanding of recent events. Alongside business correspondence was a small jeweller's pouch containing 4 garnets, their deep red colour unmistakable despite their age and lack of polish. A folded note in Sir Alistair's distinctive handwriting read simply, "If reconciliation proves impossible, this will suffice for restitution." "Stones from the Holly Crown," Julian observed with obvious bewilderment. But why would Uncle Alistair remove them? Perhaps, Poirot suggested thoughtfully, because he had already begun the process of making amends. A man preparing to donate a priceless artifact might first ensure that any legitimate claimants received appropriate compensation, even if the original could not be returned. The implications were staggering. Sir Alistair had not been the victim of a simple theft, but rather a man attempting to resolve historical injustices who had been murdered before he could complete his mission of reconciliation. The killer had not merely stolen a crown, but had prevented an act of restitution that might have healed decades-old wounds. Poirot's re-examination of the fuse box revealed additional traces of the violet-scented wax, confirming that the power failure had been carefully orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of the manor's electrical systems. The same delicate scent lingered on one of the Christmas cards from Sir Alistair's desk, Lady Eleanor's elegant greeting wishing her husband peace and reconciliation. The killer possesses not only botanical knowledge and familiarity with this house, Poirot observed, but also access to personal items and private moments. This was not the work of an outsider seeking simple revenge, but someone within our circle who felt justified in preventing Sir Alistair's planned confession and restitution. As evening approached, Poirot gathered the remaining household members in the drawing room. The empty glass case seemed to mock our efforts, while the charred smell from the conservatory served as a constant reminder that our investigation was racing against a killer desperate enough to destroy evidence with fire. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, his green eyes reflecting the firelight with predatory intensity, "we have discovered that this affair extends far beyond theft and murder into the realm of prevented justice. Someone among us could not bear to see Sir Alistair make amends for his family's historical crimes, preferring that old wounds remain unhealed and old debts unpaid. The fire in the conservatory confirms that our killer grows desperate, yet desperation often leads to mistakes that reveal more than careful planning ever could." The psychological tension in the room was palpable as each person contemplated the implications of Poirot's words, knowing that the methodical investigation was approaching its climax and that the truth, when finally revealed, would expose motivations far more complex than simple greed or revenge. "Tomorrow," Poirot concluded with quiet authority, "we shall reconstruct not merely the 32 seconds of darkness, but the entire architecture of deception that has been so carefully constructed around this tragedy. The little grey cells have perceived the pattern, and patterns, once recognized, inevitably lead to their source." The morning brought crystalline clarity to both the Yorkshire landscape and Poirot's investigation. He had spent the early hours in methodical examination of the conservatory's charred remains, his patent leather shoes carefully navigating the ash-strewn flagstones while his sharp eyes catalogued evidence that fire had failed to destroy completely. "Hastings," he called softly, producing his tweezers with characteristic precision, "observe this fragment most carefully." From beneath a collapsed beam, he extracted a twisted piece of silver chain, its links severed with surgical precision rather than torn by brute force. The metal bore traces of violet-scented wax, the same delicate fragrance that had lingered on the fuse box handle. Mrs. Pierce, the housekeeper, provided crucial testimony when summoned to the morning room. Her weathered hands twisted nervously as she recounted the previous day's events with the meticulous memory of one accustomed to household routines. Dr. Morrison requested paraffin for the conservatory heaters yesterday afternoon, she confirmed reluctantly. Said the frost would be particularly bitter. He also asked young Alice to prepare Lady Eleanor's evening tea, then met her on the landing and insisted on adding the sleeping draught himself. Most particular about the dosage, he was. Alice, the housemaid, nodded vigorously. The doctor said her ladyship had been much distressed and needed proper rest. Seemed quite concerned about her delicate constitution. Poirot's examination of Sir Alister's study desk yielded another crucial discovery. Using a soft pencil, he carefully shaded across the blotter's top sheet, revealing the ghostly impressions of pressure from a removed note. The faint words emerged like secrets reluctantly surrendered. At midnight, ghost laid to rest. Announce Museum E. The final initial, Lady Eleanor whispered, her violet eyes widening with recognition. Alister told me there would be an announcement, but he never explained my role in it. He seemed to want to associate me with whatever reconciliation he had planned. The botanical evidence proved equally damning. Among the conservatory's ruins, Poirot discovered heat-withered berries bearing the distinctive purple coloration of the rare holly variety. A careful search revealed additional traces of violet-scented wax congealed in the stone crevices, confirming that the mysterious holly leaf had indeed originated from Dr. Morrison's specialized collection. The fire was set with professional knowledge, Poirot observed, studying the burn patterns with clinical attention. The paraffin was applied with surgical precision to ensure complete destruction of specific plant specimens while leaving others relatively intact. This was not the work of a common arsonist, but someone with intimate knowledge of botanical evidence and its potential significance. Julian Thorne's artistic expertise provided additional insight when Poirot requested his analysis of the Ace of Spades card left upon the mantelpiece. The young artist studied the painted holly device with professional attention, his paint-stained fingers tracing the brush strokes with practiced sensitivity. "These strokes are labored, anxious," Julian pronounced with growing confidence. Someone copying rather than creating from natural observation. The paint was watered to accelerate drying, and the brush was stiff, splayed, not the tools of someone accustomed to artistic work. This was painted by someone with steady hands, but no artistic training. Thomas Blackwood's vindication became complete when Poirot's timeline reconstruction proved his alibi unshakable. The 47-minute journey from the Red Hart Inn to Hollycrown Manor made his presence during the crucial 32 seconds of darkness physically impossible, despite the damning footprint evidence beneath the study windows. "Someone wished us to believe in Monsieur Blackwood's guilt," Poirot explained with quiet satisfaction. "The footprint was planted deliberately, probably using a cast or impression of his distinctive boot sole. Yet the timeline makes his actual presence impossible, a paradox that illuminates the true nature of our deception." The key found in Julian's overcoat pocket underwent similar scrutiny. Poirot's magnifying glass revealed that while the brass bore traces of green wax from Sir Alister's sealed envelope, the wax appeared on the inner curve where a chain would rest, not on the outer edges where fingers would grasp during hasty concealment. "The key was on its chain when it encountered the wax," Poirot concluded. "Only later was the chain severed and the key planted. Someone with access to surgical instruments performed this precise separation, then used the key as false evidence while destroying the chain to prevent its own testimony." As afternoon shadows lengthened across the snow-covered grounds, Poirot assembled the remaining household members in the drawing room. The empty glass case seemed to mock their efforts, while the acrid smell from the conservatory served as a constant reminder that their investigation had driven someone to desperate measures. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, his green eyes reflecting the firelight with predatory intensity, "we have established that Mr. Blackwood, despite his legitimate grievance, could not have committed these crimes. We have eliminated Mr. Thorne through physical evidence and artistic analysis. The botanical evidence, the surgical precision of the chain severing, the professional application of the sedative, and the intimate knowledge of this household's routines all point to one conclusion. His gaze settled upon Dr. Morrison with the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. Tomorrow we shall gather for the final reconstruction. The little grey cells have perceived the complete pattern, and patterns, once recognized, inevitably reveal their architect. The psychological tension in the room was palpable as each person contemplated the implications of Poirot's methodical elimination, knowing that justice, long delayed, was finally approaching its moment of revelation. The December afternoon light slanted through the frost-etched windows of Hollycrown Manor as Poirot assembled the final gathering in the drawing-room. The empty glass case stood like an accusation at the room's center, its polished surface reflecting the faces of those who had lived through 3 days of mounting suspicion and fear. Inspector Bradshaw positioned himself near the mantelpiece, his notebook ready, while Thomas Blackwood occupied a chair by the window, his vindication complete, yet his expression grave with anticipation. Lady Eleanor, still pale from her ordeal but possessed of remarkable composure, sat beside Julian Thorne, whose artistic temperament had been subdued by the weight of recent revelations. Mr. Reed maintained his professional bearing, though his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles. Notably absent was Dr. Morrison, who had sent word of a sudden indisposition that prevented his attendance. The architecture of impossibility. "Ladies and gentlemen," Poirot began, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded attention in drawing-rooms across Europe. "We have before us a crime that appeared to violate the fundamental laws of possibility. A man murdered in his locked study, while simultaneously present in this room, a priceless crown vanishing from a sealed case in 32 seconds of darkness. Yet I assure you, the solution lies entirely within the realm of human psychology and mechanical precision." Poirot moved to the glass case with characteristic deliberation, his patent leather shoes silent upon the Persian carpet. The fundamental error in our reasoning lay in accepting the apparent sequence of events. We assumed that Sir Alistair was murdered during those 32 seconds of darkness, yet the physical evidence tells a different story entirely. He produced his pocket watch with theatrical precision. Sir Alistair was not killed during the power failure, mes amis. He was murdered earlier, approximately 20 minutes before the lights failed, while the study remained illuminated on its separate electrical circuit. The killer then arranged the body with surgical precision, positioning the wound to suggest it had been inflicted by someone taller and left-handed, someone unfamiliar with human anatomy. The web of physical evidence. The violet-scented wax found on both the fuse box and the severed keychain tells us much, Poirot continued, producing the evidence with careful precision. Someone prepared for the power failure by lighting a scented candle, then used that same candle to soften wax for taking an impression of Sir Alistair's key. The chain was later severed with surgical instruments and the key planted in Monsieur Thorne's overcoat as misdirection. Inspector Bradshaw leaned forward with renewed interest. "But the botanical evidence, Mr. Poirot, the rare holly leaf." "Ah, oui, the signature of our killer." Poirot's green eyes gleamed with satisfaction. The holly leaf placed so precisely upon the velvet cushion came from a rare cultivar, one requiring specialized knowledge and cultivation. Only one person among our suspects possessed such expertise. The same person who later attempted to destroy the evidence with a carefully planned fire in the conservatory. He gestured toward the empty chair where Dr. Morrison should have sat. The botanical evidence, the surgical precision of the keychain severing, the intimate knowledge of this house's electrical systems, the professional application of sedatives, all point to one individual who possessed the unique combination of skills, access, and opportunity required for this elaborate deception. The heart of darkness. But we must understand the why, for without motive, we have merely technique without purpose. Poirot's voice softened with the compassion that marked his greatest revelations. Among Sir Alister's papers, we discovered correspondence revealing his intention to donate the Holly Crown to Leeds Museum while providing monetary compensation to the Blackwood family. This act of restitution would have publicly acknowledged the historical injustice that enriched the Finch family at the Blackwood expense. Thomas Blackwood stirred in his chair, his weathered features reflecting decades of patient hope. The locket found in Lady Eleanor's possession contained more than portraits. It contained the key to understanding our killer's true identity. The woman whose miniature so resembled Monsieur Blackwood was indeed his aunt, Marcus Blackwood's daughter, who bore a child out of wedlock after the scandal of the rigged card game destroyed her family's reputation. The revelation hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. That child grew to become Dr. James Morrison, who spent 40 years building a respectable medical practice while concealing his true parentage. Sir Alister's planned confession and public restitution would have exposed Morrison's carefully guarded secret, destroying the social position he had worked a lifetime to achieve. The method revealed. Dr. Morrison's crime was one of tragic irony, Poirot explained with methodical precision. He murdered the very man who sought to make amends for historical injustice, preventing the restitution his own family deserved rather than risk exposure of his concealed identity. The 32 seconds of darkness were merely theatre, cover for removing the crown from its case using his duplicate key and planting the botanical evidence that would later point suspicion toward his own family's legitimate claim. Inspector Bradshaw's weathered face showed growing understanding, and the crown itself, hidden with the professional skill of a man accustomed to concealing medical instruments from prying eyes. Poirot indicated Dr. Morrison's medical bag, which sat abandoned by the door. A false bottom, designed for surgical tools, provided perfect concealment for a priceless artifact, reduced to mere evidence of guilt. Justice and revelation. At that moment, the drawing-room door opened to admit Inspector Bradshaw's constable, escorting a pale and defeated Dr. Morrison. The physician's usual confident bearing had crumbled, replaced by the hollow resignation of a man whose elaborate deceptions had finally collapsed. "Doctor," Poirot said gently, "you came not as a killer, but as a son protecting his mother's memory from public shame. Yet in preventing Sir Alister's confession, you denied your family the very justice it had long deserved." Dr. Morrison's voice, when it came, carried the weight of decades of suppressed resentment. He spoke of announcements and ceremonies, of museum dedications that would make my mother's shame public knowledge. I asked him to make restitution quietly, privately. He refused, saying the acknowledgement must be complete to have meaning. His hands trembled as he continued. I saw him in his study that evening, explaining his grand plans for public atonement. When he turned to his desk to show me the documents, I struck once. I am a physician. I knew precisely where to place the blade to ensure he would not suffer. The confession continued with clinical detachment as Morrison described the elaborate staging that followed. The power failure orchestrated with intimate knowledge of the manor's systems, the crown's theft using his duplicate key, the planting of evidence designed to implicate both Thomas Blackwood and Julian Thorne. The crown restored. Inspector Bradshaw approached Morrison's medical bag with professional efficiency, his weathered hands locating the hidden compartment with practiced skill. The false bottom yielded its treasure wrapped in surgical gauze. The holly crown itself, its golden leaves trembling in the firelight, its garnets glowing like drops of ancient blood. Thomas Blackwood rose slowly, his dignified bearing unchanged as he approached the restored artifact. "Doctor," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for your pain and for hers. But justice delayed is not justice denied, and truth has its own dignity that no amount of shame can diminish." Reflection and resolution. As Dr. Morrison was led away, his confession complete and his elaborate deception finally unraveled, Poirot stood in the drawing-room's gathering dusk, contemplating the tragic ironies that had driven a good man to commit inexcusable acts. "You see, Hastings," he said softly, straightening his tie with characteristic precision, "the puzzle was never truly about locked rooms or impossible thefts. It was about pride and shame, about the lengths to which we will go to protect not our own secrets, but the memory of those we love. Dr. Morrison committed murder not from greed or revenge, but from a misguided desire to shield his mother's reputation from the very acknowledgement that might have restored her family's honor. The Holly Crown would indeed find its way to Leeds Museum, accompanied by a generous endowment from the Finch estate and a complete historical accounting of the injustices that had brought it there. Thomas Blackwood, vindicated at last, would oversee the arrangement with the dignity that had sustained his family through 50 years of patient waiting for justice. "Come, mon ami," Poirot concluded, his green eyes reflecting the firelight with their familiar intelligence. "The roads will be clear by morning, and I confess a great desire to leave Yorkshire's snow behind us. This Christmas has provided quite enough drama to satisfy even my appetite for human complexity." As we prepared to depart Holly Crown Manor, I reflected upon the case's ultimate lesson, that the pursuit of respectability, when divorced from genuine honor, can lead even the most well-intentioned souls down paths of deception that end only in tragedy. The little grey cells had once again illuminated the darkest corners of human nature, revealing truths that were both terrible and necessary for justice to prevail. The morning after Dr. Morrison's confession brought a profound stillness to Holly Crown Manor, the kind of exhausted quiet that follows the resolution of long-held secrets. Snow continued to fall beyond the frost-etched windows, blanketing the Yorkshire moors in pristine white that seemed to cleanse the very air of the darkness that had pervaded recent days. The dignified departure. Dr. Morrison's removal from the manor was conducted with the quiet dignity that had marked his entire confession. Inspector Bradshaw, despite his satisfaction at solving the case, showed genuine sympathy for the physician's tragic circumstances. "A good man driven to desperate measures," he confided to me as the constable's motor disappeared down the drive. "40 years of police work, and I've rarely encountered such complex motivations. Your Belgian friend has opened my eyes to the psychology behind crime, Captain Hastings." Poirot observed the departure from the drawing-room window, his immaculate silhouette framed against the winter landscape. "The irony, Hastings," he reflected with characteristic insight, "lies not in Dr. Morrison's guilt, but in the nobility of his original impulse. He sought to protect his mother's memory from public shame, yet in preventing Sir Alister's confession, he denied his family the very vindication they had sought for 50 years. Restoration and resolution. The practical arrangements proceeded with remarkable efficiency under Mr. Reed's precise guidance. Legal documents were drafted establishing the Holly Crown's transfer to Leeds Museum, accompanied by a comprehensive historical account and a generous endowment from the Finch estate. The 4 loose garnets found so carefully wrapped in Sir Alister's desk would be professionally reset to restore the Crown's original splendor. Thomas Blackwood examined these arrangements with a dignified bearing that had sustained him through decades of patient waiting. His weathered hands held the historical documents with reverence, understanding that they represented something far more valuable than monetary compensation. "Mr. Poirot," he said with quiet gratitude, "you have restored not just property, but honor itself. My family's name will finally be cleared of any suggestion of impropriety." Lady Eleanor, still pale from her ordeal but possessed of remarkable composure, supervised the Crown's careful packing with ethereal grace. Her violet eyes, which had witnessed such elaborate deception, now reflected a kind of peace that suggested relief at truth's emergence. "I understand now why Alistair was so determined to make his announcement public," she said softly. "Private restitution, however generous, could never heal wounds that had been inflicted publicly. Character transformations. Julian Thorne, cleared of all suspicion but sobered by his proximity to such complex deception, stood by the fireplace with newfound maturity. His artistic temperament, so often at odds with practical reality, seemed to have discovered new appreciation for human complexity. Uncle Alistair was attempting something quite noble, he reflected, his paint-stained fingers absently sketching invisible patterns. I misjudged his character badly, seeing only controlling behavior where there was genuine desire for justice. The young artist approached Thomas Blackwood with awkward earnestness, offering to paint the crown for the museum's catalogue and to create a series documenting the diadem's complete history. I said cruel things about Uncle Alistair, he confessed. At the end, he tried to be better than the worst of himself. I can try to do the same. Final discoveries. Poirot's examination of the conservatory's charred remains revealed one last poignant detail, a partially melted brass nameplate reading, "In memory of Margaret Morrison, beloved daughter." The plate had once marked a special section of rare holly varieties that Dr. Morrison had cultivated as a living memorial to his mother. Even in his guilt, he honored her memory, Poirot observed with characteristic compassion. The holly leaf he placed in the crown's case was not merely evidence of botanical expertise, but a final tribute to the woman whose shame had driven him to such desperate measures. Philosophical reflection. As our motor prepared for departure, Poirot stood once more in the drawing-room, contemplating the empty glass case that had contained such mystery. The human heart, mon ami, is a labyrinth of intricate passages. Love, pride, shame, duty, they intertwine to create motives far more complex than simple greed or anger. Dr. Morrison's crime was ultimately one of misguided love, preventing the very justice his family deserved. The rector held a memorial service that evening, declaring that no calendar could forbid consolation. The nave smelled of evergreens, candlelight gilded the carved angels, and when the choir sang ancient hymns, even Poirot's methodical mind seemed touched by the ceremony's healing power. Departure and closure. As Hollycrown Manor receded behind us, Poirot adjusted his immaculate overcoat with satisfaction. We have solved not merely a crime, but a historical injustice, he declared. The little grey cells have demonstrated that human psychology, however complex, follows patterns that logic can illuminate. The Yorkshire countryside rolled past in pristine beauty, snow-covered moors stretching toward a horizon bright with promise. Behind us lay secrets finally revealed and justice belatedly served. Ahead lay London and the comfortable routine of Baker Street, where Poirot's remarkable intellect could rest until the next impossible puzzle demanded attention. Next year, Hastings, Poirot concluded with characteristic precision. Perhaps we choose a case in the south of France. The little grey cells work best in warmth. The morning of our departure dawned clear and cold, with Yorkshire's snow-covered moors stretching endlessly beneath a crystalline sky. Hollycrown Manor stood in dignified silence, its Georgian windows reflecting the winter sun like watchful eyes that had witnessed both tragedy and resolution. As our motor crunched down the gravel drive between ancient yews, I felt the peculiar mixture of relief and melancholy that follows the conclusion of a complex case. The journey to understanding. Poirot settled into the train compartment with characteristic precision, arranging his immaculate overcoat and producing a small silver tin containing precisely cut slices of plum cake. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails provided a soothing counterpoint to his methodical organization of the case files, each document placed with the geometric accuracy that marked all his endeavors. "It is curious, Hastings," he mused, offering me a slice of cake with ceremonial care, "how the most heinous crimes often spring not from pure malice, but from love twisted into unrecognizable shapes. Dr. Morrison dedicated his life to healing, yet became a murderer to protect a memory. The irony, it is most profound. As the pristine Yorkshire landscape gradually gave way to industrial towns and finally to London's familiar sprawl, Poirot continued his philosophical dissection of human nature. The little grey cells revealed not merely the identity of a killer, but the architecture of human complexity that drives ordinary people to extraordinary measures. The Vanishing Crown was merely theatre, misdirection to conceal a tragedy rooted in shame and misguided devotion. Correspondence and consequences. The weeks following our return brought a steady stream of correspondence that provided the true epilogue to our Yorkshire adventure. Inspector Bradshaw's careful script reported that Dr. Morrison had maintained his confession with dignity, his solicitors pleading guilty to manslaughter on grounds of mental strain and provocation. "A sober, contrite man," Bradshaw wrote. "Your psychological methods, Mr. Poirot, proved sharper than any police torch." The judge took account of his lifetime of service. 7 years in Pentonville, with possibility of early release. Thomas Blackwood's letter carried the measured dignity we had come to respect, accompanied by documentation of the Holly Crown's installation at Leeds Museum. The restoration had proceeded flawlessly, with the 4 loose garnets reset to their original positions, their deep red fire complementing the delicate gold leaves that trembled under careful gallery lighting. "Honor," he wrote with quiet satisfaction, "prospers only in daylight. My grandfather markers can finally rest in peace, knowing that history will record the truth." The museum's exhibition had attracted remarkable attention, transforming what might have been merely another medieval artifact into a testament to justice delayed but ultimately served. Julian Thorne's artistic series provided profound context, his canvases depicting not just the crown's physical beauty, but the emotional weight it had carried through generations of human struggle. Transformation and redemption. Lady Eleanor's correspondence revealed perhaps the most surprising transformation. Rather than retreating to London's anonymity, she had chosen to remain at Holly Crown Manor, establishing a foundation to research other historical injustices that might benefit from belated recognition. "I understand now why Alistair was so determined to make public acknowledgement of past wrongs," she wrote with newfound purpose. "Private gestures, however well-intentioned, cannot address injuries that were inflicted publicly." Her evolution from decorative young wife to active advocate for historical justice represented the most positive outcome of our Yorkshire ordeal. The violet eyes that had once seemed merely beautiful now reflected intelligence engaged with purpose beyond social obligation. Julian Thorne had discovered maturity through proximity to such complex deception, his artistic temperament finding new appreciation for human complexity. His paintings of the Crown's journey through time possessed a depth that spoke to personal transformation, showing the diadem not as isolated treasure, but as witness to generations of struggle between justice and pride. The Crown's final glory. Dr. Pemberton's detailed report from Leeds Museum provided satisfying closure to the Crown's long journey. The exhibition drew visitors not merely to admire medieval craftsmanship, but to contemplate the complete historical narrative, from legitimate creation through Georgian card games to Victorian shame and finally to modern reconciliation. The accompanying plaque told the full story, acknowledging both the Finch family's historical possession and the injustice that had separated the Blackwoods from their ancestral treasure. The Blackwood family had established a scholarship fund for promising young historians, ensuring that future generations would understand the importance of examining historical narratives with critical eyes. Truth, Thomas observed with quiet dignity, possessed its own power to heal wounds that money alone could never address. Poirot's philosophical reflection. As spring advanced toward summer in our comfortable Baker Street lodgings, Poirot reflected on the case's deeper meanings while carefully arranging his breakfast with geometric precision. "You see, Hastings, he observed, buttering his toast with characteristic attention to detail. The holly crown became not merely treasure restored, but symbol of truth's eventual triumph over deception. He paused to sip his chocolate, green eyes reflecting the morning sunlight streaming through our windows. Human nature is a garden, sometimes meticulously tended, sometimes overgrown with weeds. Dr. Morrison's love for his mother, his desire to shield her memory from perceived dishonor, became his undoing. It warped his judgment, led him to believe that preventing public truth was more important than allowing justice to run its course. The Morning Post brought 3 new cases requiring attention, and Poirot straightened his tie with characteristic satisfaction. The little grey cells must not grow complacent, even when warmed by the satisfaction of justice well served. Come, mon ami, order must be restored wherever chaos has taken residence. The Enduring Legacy. As we prepared to embark upon fresh mysteries, I reflected that our Yorkshire adventure had provided more than mere intellectual exercise. It had revealed the profound truth that justice, however delayed, possesses its own inexorable power to heal wounds that seemed beyond remedy. The Holly Crown, restored to its proper place, would continue to remind visitors that truth, like the finest medieval craftsmanship, endures through centuries of human complexity and emerges, eventually, into the light. Poirot adjusted his immaculate appearance one final time, his egg-shaped head tilted at that characteristic angle indicating complete satisfaction with order restored. The mysteries, Hastings. They are for the little grey cells, but the healing, that we must leave to time and truth working together. With a little order, they do very well indeed. The case of the Holly Crown betrayal had ended not merely with a murderer's confession, but with the restoration of honor, the vindication of the innocent, and the triumph of justice over the complex deceptions that pride and shame can weave around the human heart. In the end, Poirot had demonstrated once again that the most perplexing mysteries often possessed the most profoundly human solutions.